Welcome back to This Week Abroad. Now, a few months ago, the Barbados government announced revenue collection measures, which included increases in taxes across the board. Key among those increases was a 10% hike in the National Social Responsibility Levy. But this was the tipping point for many Bajans. However, analysts say that Bajans wouldn't really start to feel the full effect of these taxes until October. So now we're checking in. This week abroad, we speak with Caribbean economist Marla Dukharan for details on the Barbados economy. Hello and welcome to the show, Marla.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
All right, so what is the economic climate in Barbados right now? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, if you go to Barbados, you wouldn't guess the economic climate is not very healthy right now. As a casual observer, as a visitor, everything seems fine. But if you scratch the surface and you look below the calm and serene and fun facade of life in Barbados, you will realize that if you look at the macroeconomic data, that things are really not very sustainable and healthy right now. So, for example, Barbados has the highest debt to GDP in the Caribbean and probably the second highest in the world after Greece. Japan, some people consider to be higher, but a lot of Japan's debt is held by the central bank so that they can repay it as soon as they would like to. But anyway, globally, amongst the top three most indebted countries in the world and the highest in the region. On top of that, you have a situation where the government has been running fiscal deficits in excess of 8% of GDP for about 3 years. And before that, it was even wider. You were somewhere around 12% of GDP. And so what that means is that you have a longer-term problem taking place in Barbados as opposed to a short-term temporary tightness in the fiscal situation. On top of that, since 2014 or so, the central bank has basically been printing money to give the government to pay their bills. And so you've had the former governor of the central bank, for example, announcing that the central bank was printing 50 million Barbados dollars a month to pay public servants' salaries. And that's a sign to me that the government is pretty much insolvent and has been for some time and has only managed to stay afloat because of the printing of local currency in order to give the government to meet its obligations. So that in a nutshell will say to you how bad the situation is, certainly from a fiscal standpoint.
Now the Christmas season is right around the corner. How's the Barbados Yuletide looking?
I think because of the higher tax that you mentioned, the National Social Responsibility Levy, you might see a dip in the amount of Christmas shopping, online Christmas shopping, imports for Christmas demand. You might see a bit less of that because it means that people are typically paying 2% or even more if you compound it for imported goods. And you might also see people shifting the way that they consume, where they might have typically gone into a department store and done their shopping. Perhaps they would probably shift more to online shopping where they might be able to get better prices once they have the foreign exchange to do that. So you might see some shifting.
Now, do you think the Barbados debt management plan could have been less burdensome on the people?
Now, unfortunately, like most of us in the Caribbean, not just Barbados, the government is the largest spender and the largest economic actor, the largest employer. And so even though the government in Barbados had laid off roughly 3,000 workers a couple of years ago, that did not put a significant enough dent in their spending. That reduced their wage bill by maybe about 10%. And so there has to be cutbacks in government spending. There is no escaping that. So to answer your question, it is definitely going to have an impact on everyone when the government does embark on an fiscal consolidation program that it needs to and that makes sense. There is really no insulation. I think what is important is that, as in the case of Jamaica, when the IMF imposed the austerity measures under the program, which, by the way, I mean, Jamaica has the most austere budget on the planet, they also imposed a floor on social spending, meaning that no matter what happens, the government could not have spent less than a certain amount on its social welfare spending. And I think that is an element that has to be adopted in any kind of consolidation program that Barbados will implement. I think what is more important as well, or maybe equally important as imposing a minimum level of spending from the fiscal standpoint, is making sure that this spending is well targeted.
Now, is there any indication that economic conditions in Barbados will improve soon?
I am of the view that when Barbados does in fact embark on the fiscal consolidation program that it needs to, either voluntarily or imposed by the IMF at some point in time when there is a debt crisis or a balance of payments crisis in Barbados, I think it means that you will see a significant correction in the economy. And so what I'm trying to say is that we might see some improvement in the interim, like now, but when we get to a point where we have to seriously address the fiscal situation in Barbados, there might be some macroeconomic and social repercussions that will be felt. That's my view. And I think there is an election coming up in Barbados in early next year. And I am of the view that no matter who wins the election, this unsustainable fiscal path that Barbados is on has to be corrected. Like I said, either voluntarily or by an IMF program if it isn't corrected before. And you will see some fallout from that. So the short term might be positive, but the medium term to me shows that there will be some fallout. There's some negative fallout, but we will set the stage then for a longer term, more favorable outcome.
And how is the private sector responding to the austerity measures?
Well, you might have seen earlier, a couple months ago, roughly, was it about 20,000, 30,000 Barbadians came out for a march. In Jamaica and Trinidad, we do that kind of thing all the time. In Barbados, this is not something we see. And so I took that to mean that people are not happy with the situation. So to answer your question, probably the response is not that favorable. People are not very happy with the current situation.
Caribbean economist Marla Dukharan, thank you for joining me on This Week Abroad.
No problem. It's been a pleasure, Andrew. Thank you.
Now we go further abroad in a bit, but first, here's a look at how some of the major international commodities and their trading this week. When we come back, after 2 decades, the U.S. lifts trade embargo against Sudan. The international stories are next.